So when the train came into the station, I didn't see anything immediately on the platform. I recognised that the train was not supposed to be on the platform, so I tapped in to enter to see what was going on. As I walked onto the platform, I could see people standing in the doorways of the train looking a bit confused and a little bit distressed. As I looked to my left, I spotted a young lad who was laying on the floor in the train door area. He then sort of slid back into the train. I could see blood on his face. I was still unaware at this point of what was happening until I started to walk further up towards the front of the train where there was a group of people gathered. As I see them gathered at the front, I wanted to go up and establish what was going on, and that's when I suddenly heard people screaming and shouting, "Run, run, run." Of course, I'm still stood there like a deer in headlights trying to process what is actually happening. At this point, I see people running past me covered in blood, and that's when I realised something's happened that obviously shouldn't be happening. This is something quite serious. In the distance, it looked like I spotted someone dressed all in black jump off the train and start heading down in our direction as people were running. So I've turned behind me. I spotted people congregated behind me on the platform. So immediately I just gestured towards the door and just shouted to everyone, "Run out the station, please exit, leave, leave, leave." As I've done so, people are following my instructions. They're walking out of the station. Some are running out as well, trying to get out quickly. As I left the station, obviously aware that something's going on that's quite serious, I turn to my right outside the car park and I see someone running around the car park dressed in black, looking a little bit sort of almost like they don't know what they're doing or where they are. They're just running around aimlessly. I couldn't quite tell if that was an attacker. I sort of just took it as I need to get away safely, quickly. So I turned the opposite direction and ran up the hill away from the station to the main road. And that's where I met some of the people that were present on the train when the incident took place. By this point, police have swarmed the station. They've all arrived. From my belief there, one of the attackers was apprehended outside the station. I believe he was waving a knife, shouting something to the coppers. They tased him, got him to the floor and apprehended him. But while this was happening, I was trying to comfort a passenger that was having a panic attack on the street just outside the station.
And were there lots of police officers on the platform when the train arrived, or did they arrive afterwards?
So they arrived afterwards. So when I've gone onto the platform to see what was going on, they weren't present at this point. It was as I left the station and started to run up the hill that they all came in. So I would say easily mere minute to 2 minutes of me coming out the station, if not even that, seconds, they were all swarming into the station. So it was a very quick response.
And did you see the second suspect being arrested?
No. To my belief, the second suspect remained on the train from what I've heard. At the time when all this took place, I was only aware of one attacker. Initially, I was told there was 2 people stabbed, so I wasn't aware of the full scale at the time of what had happened. It was only a short while later when I spoke to a member of station staff that they confirmed to me that it was 10 casualties and 2 in critical condition.
And when you were speaking to people on the train, you know, what were they saying? What were they describing?
So some people told me they weren't even aware of what had happened. They were completely oblivious. One of the guys I was stood next to, who was trying to travel back to London, he informed me that he see people covered in blood running up the train, shouting that people were stabbing people. His initial response was, it must be a Halloween prank. People are drunk and intoxicated. They're trying to be clever. He said so initially he disregarded it. He didn't really think too much into it. Obviously, when more people started coming down the train in a panic, then he realised, hang on a minute, something clearly is seriously going on, and that's as the train was routed into the platform here at Huntingdon.
You obviously switched into your professional training, by the sound of it. You know, what kind of training have you had for this sort of eventuality?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
I was saying, I mean, what kind of training have you had for this kind of incident?
So, being as I work for London Underground, Transport for London, we are trained to deal with all kinds of events involving acts of terrorism, violence, or anything out of the ordinary. So when I realised that something serious was going on, I just went into full training mode and realised all I need to do is just try and get everyone to leave the station. So I immediately shouted to everyone, please just leave the station, exit the station, please leave calmly. And I'm gesturing towards the doors so people knew exactly where to go. And it was just a case of get everyone out that station, get them to a place of safety. And then obviously once the professionals turn up, like obviously the emergency services, they can handle the situation. It was just for me, get everybody, as many people as I can, away from the station and to a place of safety.
But you can give us an insight into what the driver had to do in this scenario, because we know that the emergency button was pushed in one of the carriages. So what, wouldn't that try to stop the train?
So the procedure would be when an emergency alarm is activated, the driver would have so many seconds to respond to that alarm. If they don't respond in time, the train will come to an automatic emergency stop. So what the driver had to do was override that alarm, so he's aware that it's happened, but he can keep the train moving. When I spoke to the driver, he told me that he had people banging on his door telling him that people had been stabbed. So of course he followed the procedure, which was to phone the controller, inform the controller that something's going on his train and tell the controller what's been reported to him. And obviously then the controller was to act and get that train routed into the platform and stopped to get everyone off the train and into a place of safety.
So he worked very quickly.
Yeah, so the driver was very quick in his response. The controller was very quick to act. I mean, the journey time between Peterborough and Huntingdon is around 10 to 15 minutes. So the driver had to act very quickly, and obviously you've got to think this train is travelling at 125 miles an hour tops. So that driver has mere minutes to act and make sure that people are aware of what's going on and get that train stopped as quickly as possible in the best place and get everyone off that train as soon as possible. So that driver's actions and the controller's actions made a massive impact on how quickly this could be dealt with.
Yeah, and they've no doubt saved lives. Do you know if the driver
100%.
would have been able to see what was going on CCTV?
I'm not familiar with the trains on LNER, so I do know that trains should be equipped with CCTV, and I believe these trains are. So if the driver needed to, I believe he can pull the CCTV up on his in-cab monitor and see what was going on. But when I spoke to him, he didn't mention doing that. He just told me about his interaction with the controller and getting the train stopped in Huntingdon station as quickly as possible.
How was he?
He was shaken up, very, very shaken up. Like he said to me, we're on the railway, we are all trained to our very high standard of sort of dealing with these kinds of incidents and more. But when the situation happens, you sort of freeze in the moment and you're thinking, what do I do? What do I do? And you have to take a step back, compose yourself, and then act on what you know to do. So for the driver, I need to get this train stopped in a place of safety where emergency services can act quickly and get to the train quickly, and also get passengers off the train quickly and safely. Obviously the controller, he's got to keep an eye on that train, monitor its movements, make sure he can get the train set in time so the route is clear to enter the platform at Huntingdon. Bearing in mind, the train had just left the platform just before this train had come in, so it was a very quick response.
And how quickly did paramedics get to the injured?
They were very, very quick. As soon as the police arrived, the paramedics was there with them. I saw stretchers coming out left, right and centre. They were running across to the entrance of the station where a lot of the wounded were. They'd come off the train out to the entrance of the station, and that's where it was cordoned off. And the paramedics were able to gain access to the entrance of the station and then obviously administer first aid, get everyone onto the stretchers and get them into the ambulances as quickly as possible. Everyone in the emergency services, and I mean everyone, was very, very quick, very efficient. It was very, very fast, and I can't fault anybody for their response time and their professionalism in getting everything handled as quickly as possible.
And most of the passengers ran for it, did they? I mean, the people who got off the train.
Sorry, can you repeat that? A train just passed me.
Yeah, no, I was saying most of the passengers who were unhurt, what happened? Did they all leave the station?
Yeah, so everybody left the station. They were sort of just past the cordoned off area. Just outside the station, there's a taxi bay. So just where the taxi bay is at the front of the station, that was cordoned off. So when the police came to interview people, they asked everyone to stand aside so they could all be spoken to individually about what they encountered, what did they witness, what did they hear, what did they see. Once they'd spoken to everyone, obviously they still needed to keep people around for further questioning. In the process of this taking place, emergency transport was arranged by LNER and Thameslink to get coaches down to the station so they could get people on coaches and continue their journey after they'd been spoken to by the police.
It sounds like you were quite away from the suspect when he left the train, but were you able to hear what he was saying or shouting or anything like that?
No, I didn't hear anything being shouted or said. All I could hear was screaming from the passengers that were running towards me. All I see was someone dressed fully in black jump off the train and start heading in our direction, and that's when I thought someone dressed all in black could well be the person causing the problem. I wasn't willing to take any chances to find out. I wanted to just get myself and other people to safety and let obviously the emergency services come in and they can deal with whoever's responsible for the incident. So my train of thought was get myself to a place of safety, get as many passengers as I can to a place of safety and get them as far away from the perpetrator as possible. Like I say, I wasn't aware there was two people at the time. It wasn't until about 40 minutes later that I was informed that there was another person still on the train that was also responsible for the attacks.
And can I ask you, what do you do on London Underground?
I'm a customer service supervisor, so I'm a supervisor for stations.
Right, so I mean, with your professional experience and your training, I mean, it sounds like you're impressed by how this was handled.
Yes, you know, for myself, when I'm working on a station, I'm usually lone working, so I'm always on my own running a station solo. So if anything was to happen on a station that I'm working at, you know, I would like to think that emergency services would be prompt, they'd be very quick and efficient like they were last night. You know, seeing them come in as fast as they did was very assuring that if anything like this happens again, which I really hope it doesn't, I know that everybody's in good hands.
So it didn't make you think we need to change the way things work?
Sorry, say that again?
So it didn't make you think we need to change the way things work or the number of staff on stations or on trains or anything like that?
In terms of trains, I mean, it is very difficult to staff every train with protection. You've got to think there's hundreds of trains running up and down the country and all around London every day. It would be very difficult to have every train secured where passengers can feel comfortable. But what I would say is to anyone member of the public wise who travels on trains, every member of staff on the railway is trained to a very high standard to make sure that if anything like this does occur, we know exactly what to do to get people into a place of safety. We're trained to deal with emergency responses, how to get them to the perpetrators as quickly as possible, you know, get as many people to safety as quickly as we can. You know, across the railway, especially TfL, we are trained to a very, very high standard. And last night made me realise how grateful I am for that training, because without that, I would not have known what to do. And I could have been frozen on the platform, I could have been another statistic or something like that. I'm just very grateful that we are trained to a very, very high standard and we can act quickly to get as many people to safety as quickly as possible.
Dean McFarlane, thank you very much indeed.